We are so glad you guys are here. And I hope that you feel comfortable too to just sort of jump in with questions, comments, things like that. There will certainly be Q&A time. But one of the things that we were thinking about was that, we have this huge membership and we have this relatively small board. And I think a lot of members don't always know exactly what the board does or whether there's a place for them on it or if they're even interested. And there are not many opportunities to sort of hear about it or sort of know. And it feels like a lot to throw your name into the ring without really knowing what you're getting yourself into, which is, I think, probably how a lot of us got involved, is that we didn't really know what we were getting into, but that's okay. And so we just thought it would be a worthwhile idea to have a, sort of discussion that demystifies it a little bit, just so that people are better informed about what kind of choice they want to make about whether or not it's something they're interested in. And if so, what kinds of rules appeal to them and what kind of time commitment it is and that kind of thing. So we figured we would just sort of go through pretty quickly, but leave plenty of time for Q&A because we want it to be a short enough thing that people can watch it on their own time without feeling like they have to commit to 45 minutes. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Christina to get us started. And then we'll take it from there.
Thanks, Eleanor. And thanks for joining us tonight. Generally speaking, the goal of tonight is, and SPP overall, is to increase the representation and accessibility of this board for members. As Eleanor mentioned, we have a large membership and a small board, and it's sometimes hard to know what that involves. So part of that, we're hoping to increase your access to the board and demystify what that process might look like in case you were interested in serving in those roles or know other people that might be great in those roles. So today we're going to take some time to describe what each board position does, giving some information about the time commitments and what your responsibilities are and which roles are available this upcoming term, with applications being due or the nominations being due by the 31st of January now. We also want to hear from you about what your questions are about specific roles or what supports you would need if you were to choose to pursue a board position. So you'll hear from all of us and we'll introduce ourselves in a second and kind of why we decided to serve in each role. And I will turn it back over to Eleanor to do our first part of the panel.
Perfect. And if you have questions along the way, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll go through them at the end. It might be easiest. So maybe to get started, I'll just tell you a little bit about myself and why I chose to serve and what I get out of it. So I have served in two positions. I served as member at large for student trainee development, and now I'm the current member at large for membership. And initially it was sort of a thought when I was looking at promotion in a couple of years a while back, and was thinking, okay, service to the community, sort of part of the national organization. And I thought, I'd like to do more with SPP, but I don't really know what my options are. And it just so happened that an email came across that said, we're looking for nominations for the student trainee role, and I was associate training director at that time, and thought this could be fun. I'll just try it. And I really didn't expect anything to happen. But I feel like I got so much out of it that I didn't expect. It really did help for promotion. So, on a selfish note, that was really important and helpful. But I also realized that I had in that role so much influence over how our money got spent for students, what kind of access students had, what kind of opportunities we had. And it was just so fulfilling and exciting. And I also really enjoyed networking and getting to know the other people on the board, getting to know the membership better, so that I decided to try it again. And I've been really enjoying this new role as well. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Christina. And then if Christina, you want to tag someone else when you're done.
Sure, thanks. So I'm Christina Kopalu, and I am the newly elected member at large for diversity. So I'm following in Melissa's path, and I have big shoes to fill, but she's honestly a big part of why I decided to kind of self-nominate for this position, is because I was really so invigorated by all of the anti-racism work we've done over the last 3 years as an organization, and wanted to continue that and wanted to be more involved. And then started reaching out to Melissa through tweets initially, and then connecting with Idia and Jessica Valenzuela and Lori Crosby, and just learning about other ways I could be involved in the organization when I had kind of been a relative outsider historically because I had changed fields. So all that to say is I was really passionate about DEI work and wanted to know how I could help SPP, and I hope to do that over the next 3 years. I would like to tag Idia next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Idia Thurston, and I'm an associate professor at Texas A&M. It's very similar to Christina's story. I met Eleanor, who was in this position before me, and she tapped, I don't even know why. I think we met at a conference and we had this shared conversation and a different conference. I think it was TOSS, the Obesity Society conference. And she just shared a little bit about the role. And I think that's important to emphasize because to me, the board always seemed like this group of people deciding things that just feels very unrelatable to me. And she just made it seem so very relatable. And particularly I'm passionate about training students. So that angle of that position seemed to fit well because I think as someone who didn't train in a ped psych program in terms of graduate school, it can feel like a little bit, again, that outsider kind of feeling. But what was nice was I knew I loved training. So that part I knew. And then the rest, she was like, oh, I can teach you that stuff. Like, it's not, it's very easy. Of course, it's not that easy, but she made it seem like it was very easy, a breeze. And my role is the MAL for Student Trainee Development. And I know we'll talk a little bit more about our roles, but it's kind of an up and down role. So there's really busy times and there's quieter times. So I think different positions have sort of that ebb and flow. And I think that's important for people to ask about the position because it may or may not work for you depending on your schedule. So I liked this one because it's sort of like October is really busy because it's grants, but then it's kind of quiet. Then they, report. So that's really nice. I think the other thing that I get out of leadership is that for me, demystified leaders. Because of doing the SPP board, I feel more comfortable volunteering for other kind of roles. So the APA Presidential Task Force on Health Equity, I would not have done it if I hadn't served on the board. I think it gave me a little bit of confidence. I've heard people say that too about like the loan repayment grant. Like when you get that, you feel more confident submitting other grants. So I see like as a gateway to other leadership opportunities and have led to a lot of impact, like truly that, within ped psych, but also even beyond ped psych, for example, through the Presidential Task Force. So, and one last thing I'll add is I think these are all human people making decisions with the best knowledge that they have. So it helps me realize that I have something to offer from my own lived experience and worldview. And everyone else is bringing that also to this space. So it made that very like, it felt like real, it felt less mystical, I guess, which is the point of this session. Okay, I will pass on to Erica.
Hi, I'm Erica Sood. I am a pediatric psychologist at Nemours Children's Health in Delaware. I have served on 3 different roles on the board since 2014. So in 2014, I was program chair for Division 54 programming at the APA convention. And I got into that because Tim Wysocki, who was the president-elect who gets to choose the next, or at least propose the next program chair, who was at my institution, approached me and said, hey, would you want to do this? And I was like, okay. I didn't really want to say no, but I really didn't know what it involved. And I think he said, you'll get to go to Hawaii. And I said, okay, that sounds good. Because the conference when I was actually co-chair was in Hawaii. And it was great. And I think, although I didn't really know what I was getting into, it was really exciting to be able to kind of contribute to what our programming looked like, and really interact with a lot of the people submitting, and it was great. And then that led to being SPAC conference chair in 2018, which was a much bigger role. And then I was elected to be secretary from 2019 to 2021. So I just rotated off. And the difference between the first two roles and secretary is that secretary is an elected position. So that means you're a voting board member. You're on the executive committee. And I think just overall, I had a much better understanding of like all of the things that were going on in SPP. I had to take minutes, so I had to understand them. And anything I didn't understand, I had to follow up on. And so that was a great role in the sense that I think it really helped me to understand all the different ways that SPP really makes decisions and all the different things going on. Whereas the first two roles were much more specific, but I would say, very exciting to be able to contribute in that way. So happy to talk more as the webinar goes on. Sorry. Melissa, have you gone yet?
I have not, so I'll take it from here. So hi, everybody. I'm Melissa Santos. I'm a pediatric psychologist here at Connecticut Children's. I think you're going to start to see some themes regarding kind of all the things that we talked about. So I am entering my second role on the board. I've spent the last 3 years as member at large for diversity, and I'm now on day 5 as president-elect for SPP. So I joined I joined the board because when I joined SPP, I felt completely like an outsider. I felt like I didn't know anybody when I joined SPP. I found my home in the obesity SIG. And I think for many of us, the SIGs are sort of where we find our landing point in our home sort of from there. But even from there, I still felt a little bit like, where do I belong in this organization? Is this really an organization for me? Like Idia, I didn't come from a ped psych training. My PhD is in counseling psychology. I have a very different background. And then when I saw sort of the position come through for member at large for diversity, I remember reaching out to Jessica Valenzuela, who was in the role at the time. And I was like, so is this like a position that they just have and they just, put somebody in a role? Like, what do you do? And I remember she said to me, you get out of being on the board what you put into it. If you just want to go to meetings and sit there and, yes, and agree, then that's what you do. Or you can really take it as an opportunity to run with some ideas and things like that. And I will say that I really think that has been my experience on the board. There's the business part of the board, and then there's the part of the board that's just the fun part where we really think about how we craft the path for the next iteration of our organization and where we want to take the field of pediatric psychology. And I think that's what I really took away from it, besides feeling like I finally got my connection of like, okay, this is like what this organization has to offer, is also just the sense of like, wow, you can really make an impact, not just on our organization, but really on the field and how it's viewed along the way, which I think was not something that I was totally expecting from having to join the board. So that's just kind of my overview of how I ended up here. So Eleanor, am I sending this back to you?
No, you actually are just giving a brief, I think you kind of covered it, but is there anything else that you want to sort of highlight that the board actually does? Because it's like the board and like there are all these different, roles, but like sort of what is the role of the board?
So the board, I don't, SPP in some respects is a business. And the SPP board is really designed to make sure the business stays afloat and doesn't go bankrupt and fulfills its mission and its objectives. So, we have our monthly board meetings, and sometimes our board meetings are spent on things like policy and procedures that Erica gets to type away at and make sure that she got them all right. We make sure that we have our continuing education credits going to members and that we have our conferences on point. And obviously the last couple of years figuring out if we were going to hold our conferences in person and all the decision-making that goes around there. But then I think there's the fun part, funner part of the board, which is what's the impact we want to make? Where do we want to go? What do we want to do? Where do we want our focus to be? I was obviously really fortunate being member at large for diversity that we've spent a large part of the last couple of years focused in the area of diversity. But I think there's a real fun part to getting a bunch of smart people in a room together and really brainstorming and coming up with ideas of things that we're interested in, things we'd like to pursue, things that we'd like to see our organization get involved with. And I would say for the most part, people are very supportive of where people want to go with this with this field and our organization. And that's really what makes this board fun, is the impact that you can have, not just for the time that you're on the board, but the long lasting impact of some of the things that you can do while you're on the board. I don't know if that makes sense.
I would agree with that. And I think it's actually been really neat to be in different roles on the board and to do something in one role and then realize that, 5 years later, that thing's still being done, or somebody else has taken that and built on it and made it a lot better. But you do see over time the impact that, your work has had going forward. I think that's really neat.
And I will say, and kudos to Erica. Erica was the first SPAC chair, conference chair, to include a patient family at the conference to actually present at the conference. And it's something that now, years later, we're bringing back about how we can involve patient families in our organization a little bit better. So I think to Erica's point, even if it's not like immediate that a change is made right away, that impact of the things that we do stick within this organization a whole lot.
Absolutely. So I want to just sort of briefly, because this is all available on the website, but I want to make sure that you just sort of see what these roles look like. Hopefully you'll be able to see my screen. So these are the elected roles. So we talked about president, president-elect, past president. This is a 3-year sort of thing, but you spend 1 year as president-elect, 1 year as president, 1 year as past president. So it's a really nice way too to gradually move in and out of the role so that you're not just sort of launched in as president of this organization. This really is the person who's the leader, in charge of all meetings, appoints committees, liaisons, communicates with APA. This person presides over award, does the annual APA conference chair like Tim Wysocki and Erica, oversees nominations, elections, and those sort of rules are a little bit broken out in which year you're in. But that's really what that role is. And it really is sort of that leadership vision. Each president comes in with their own vision of what they really want to focus on. And I think that that's really a value too. Secretary, as Erica noted, is the note record keeper for meetings, serves on the executive committee, and she can answer more questions about that. But you do really get involved in the nitty gritty of all of it, which is kind of cool. But you really do have to be alert during those meetings. You can't lose focus at any point. The treasurer oversees the funds, prepares the budgets, maintains the tax forms. We've had some really outstanding people in that role. And so they're really great people as well who can sort of guide the next person. We have our representatives to the APA Council. So this is also, and Idia didn't note, but this is going to be her role next, which is so exciting. But representing SPP at APA, developing these task force resolutions to support child and family health, being the voice at that table. And so that's a really great way to take SPP even to the next level and be part of that table. I'm the current member at large for membership. I work with the membership committee. I track membership and engagement. I work really closely with the SIGs and with the international committee. And a lot of what I've chosen to do is try and figure out how we can make our organization more accessible to a more diverse and representative group of pediatric psychologists and be a better home for people who didn't just train in particular ped psych organizations. The member at large for student training development actually works with a really big budget. It's a lot of money that they oversee in terms of the awards and the travel and the grants. And it's an amazing way to think about ways to develop the next generation. That's probably my favorite role, I will admit. The member at large for continuing education has a really important job of overseeing all the CEs, coordinating with APA, making sure that we're serving our membership by providing CEs through the conference, through the SIG events. That's really pretty exciting as well. That person has in years past had to be pretty tech savvy too. I'll never forget Jen Sherman running around with all the iPads at conferences, but that's even getting easier. And then of course, the member at large for diversity, as Christina and Melissa both talked about, you chair the diversity committee, thinking about the EDI efforts throughout SPP, administering the diversity research grants and awards, and really promoting EDI efforts amongst the membership. As Erica referred to, there are non-voting positions that are appointed. Those have different terms. The journal editors are part of the board, non-voting members, the chair and co-chair of SPAC, the chair and co-chair of Division 54 programming through APA, the person or persons, because we're sort of splitting it amongst a number of people, I think, responsible for the coordination of all communication that's going out, the historian. Did you know we have a historian? That's a pretty fun job as well. And then our fearless webmaster, who right now is Dustin Wallace, who works with the website and the listserv. So hopefully that just gives you a little bit of an overview. I'm going to pass it to Idia, who can also talk about some of the other ways to serve. If you also are like, I don't know if I want to do something elected or something for a 3-year term, but I'm really interested in testing the waters, there are other ways too.
Yeah, and then the one thing I was just going to add to what Erica said is that all of those, particularly the non-voting positions, well, probably all of the positions have shifted a little bit with Degnon. So Degnon is the management company. So you all remember Karen kind of did all the things, and it's just amazing when you see with this management company how to break down what she did is just very impressive. But so the management company Degnon has joined and is, a year, officially, I think a year now with us, and is learning ways to support these positions. So one thing to keep in mind is that if there's a position you're interested in, some of it seems, maybe you're not sure, like there's also, they can provide more support. So you could also be thinking about, okay, maybe this feels like busy work, some parts of it, like how could you talk with them to help, develop tools to make it easier. Like I can think of one thing with submitting grants is a lot of 12,000 emails from students and all that. They were able to set up a database so people could submit it. So there are different ways that if you could be creative, and they can try to come up with a solution to make the roles easier too, or just more manageable. And I think both Wendy and Jennifer, the previous presidents, we're shifting the board roles a little bit from sort of task management to more visionary thinking, where we're really thinking about where the division wants to go. We changed the vision and mission of the organization, like updated that, so that the board's role is less of like kind of doing the clicking or, kind of menial basic tasks to more like really envisioning what the organization could look like in the future. And it definitely has been a shift in the most recent presidents. And it might just be the time period of doing that, but I do think that with Degnon coming on, that also allowed for some of that creativity. So I just want to emphasize that there are always ways to keep improving each position and making it so that the type of impact you want to make, you can make. And just because we did it one way doesn't mean it's the way it has to be. But so one of the, I alluded to one of the task forces, which was the Presidential Task Force for Health Equity that I served on. And that really, those go out to all the membership, so that you didn't have to be a board member to apply for that. And there are many similar task forces that come up throughout the year. And we're changing the process, and maybe others can help me if they know it better, with how to ensure equity in how these positions are shared. Because in the past, it's sort of like, okay, do you know someone? Because often there's a tight deadline, and let's just get someone, and trying to be more thoughtful about how we do this. And I think, Eleanor, you're managing like a database so that we can get information from folks. Eleanor, do you want to touch on that a little bit?
That link. I'll put that link in the chat.
Perfect. So that if you're interested in positions, you can sign up, we'll have a database of folks so that as opportunities come up, we can reach out to people maybe who have expertise in certain areas. And then the presidents usually get different calls from other organizations that are looking to collaborate with pediatric psychologists. So new task forces come up, different collaboration opportunities with, I think Division 53 tends to come up a lot, but many other divisions as well. And then there are liaisons roles that come up that are not necessarily board voting positions, but other ways to be active. And of course, our SIGs. So many of us, I think on the call right now on this panel, came in to the board positions through SIGs. Like, I was on the diversity SIG and co-chair of that SIG. So again, it was a way to sort of get your feet wet and try it out. And then, feel like you have some support from a smaller group to go on to that larger group. What was the other thing I was going to mention? I know one important part, I had mentioned this a little bit, but is that we're really trying to think about diversifying the board in terms of career stage. So thinking about early career professionals, students, mid-career, later career folks in terms of professional roles. So thinking about not just folks working at hospitals, but like me, I work at a university, and really thinking about different roles that people are working in, and also background. Often we're using the addressing framework. So looking at all aspects of diversity. And APA has a new template for leadership service that we're hoping to adapt for SPP, where we ask about some of that information that you're willing to share. And share about how that perspective you're bringing in could help support the role in the organization. So really thinking about diversity broadly, and how those different voices really help SPP be, as the division that can support the new and upcoming generation. I think those are the things. Eleanor, let me know if I missed something.
No, that's great. And I think we'll pass it over to Erica to talk about time commitment, with the caveat that it really varies. So yes.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it varies a lot. On average, probably about 2 to 3 hours a week. But I found, in the roles that I was in, it varied a lot based on the time of the year, and also based on the specific position. So I would say secretary is actually the most kind of steady, because you're doing kind of the same tasks every month. We have one 2-day meeting, the midwinter meeting, that happens at the beginning of the year. And so taking minutes for 2 full days, that can be really time consuming, but for the most part, I would say it was pretty steady. Unlike the program chair and conference chair positions, that varied very widely. So there were times where it was way more than 2 to 3 hours a week, and then times where it was, there wasn't as much going on. And so, I think it really depends on the position. And I would say that goes for both elected and appointed positions. I wouldn't say that one is more than the other necessarily. It really depends on the specific position in terms of the time of the year also. And I do agree that with Degnan coming in and supporting, SPP, I think a lot of tasks that board members used to do are now Degnan is helping with. And so that's wonderful. So some of the time commitments I think will change as well. But if you have questions about specific positions and time commitments of specific positions, then I would encourage you to ask someone who served in that role, and ideally someone who served recently. So maybe the person who's currently serving in the role, just because I think it has changed over time.
I was just wondering if I could add something brief about kind of the self-nomination process that hasn't necessarily come up yet. So this being self-nominated into any of the open positions, and then requiring historically we've required the 10 votes to seal the nomination to be put on the ballot. But we don't want that to be a barrier to serving in any of these roles. So for example, if you're at a smaller institution, or you're the only pediatric psychologist and don't know others, reaching out to the board and we can help you with that process, because we want, if you're interested, we want to be able to help support you in that role. And I hope I didn't jump ahead too much, Eleanor.
No, that was it, because I think we can really open it for question and answer. And it may be that you guys don't have anything, which is totally fine. But even if somebody's watching this recording and thinks, oh, I have a question, anyone on this call is really happy to answer and field any questions. So folks should feel free to reach out to any one of us or multiples of us to ask questions. We'd rather have any choice you make be an informed choice. But we really are hoping that more members choose to be part of this and take a seat at the table. So is there any question that people have so far?
And can I just add one little tiny thing? And I think you were saying this, I had a baby run into the office, so I might have missed this. But did you already say about the nominations? Like, we will support people getting nominations to the 10? Okay, because yes. And then the one thing I was going to add was perks. I feel like we've been talking a lot of like, oh, here's the works. There's also like perks. And I know, like, when we have board meetings, like, there we get opportunity to connect with people. I mean, people who, like, I read about in books, and like I got to have dinner with, and nice dinners. And so there's nice things. I feel like, I think this year Wendy got plaques for board membership, which was really nice. that I don't know if that's something that's been done before. That was the first time I had experienced that. It's nice. It's something that you can like put on your office wall and it makes an impact. I think, as Eleanor alluded to, for tenure and promotion, especially as pediatric psychologists, it shows like you're serving within your field, giving back to your field. That matters a lot. I don't know if other people have perks, but I know hanging out with Melissa is fun. I mean, there are things that I don't want us to come off like, oh, it's all this work, because there's also really nice, just human things that, again, part of the demystifying is that, you know, these are people who maybe you would not have had access to, and that you do, and you meet them and they're just like regular, they, you know, and that was just really cool. So.
And I think it's a lot that we've all done multiple roles, and I'm sure that Christina will be doing like 3 more after this too. So sorry, Melissa, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think just to like Idia's point, I remember my first midwinter meeting, and I remember watching Erica and thinking, my God, this is the first time she's secretary and she's having to figure out how to type up this whole 2-day meeting. But I remember walking into that restaurant in Phoenix with Dustin, who was the only other person that I somewhat knew, and like being like completely scared off my rocker and like, oh my God, what am I going to talk to these people about? And oh my God, Tanya's here. And like these people that I read articles about, and just being like, and it fit naturally. And I don't mean to sound like corny, but it did, it just fit, it rolled, it worked. And I really do think there is that connection that the board, no matter how different we all are on the board and how diverse we are, there is this bond that just sort of occurs. And I can't imagine not knowing Idia now, because we met at that obesity week back then, but like my world without Idia now would be like so sad. So I do think there's these things that you really do get from the board that are just, you'll take forever.
I think so many of us are so specialized as well in the work that we do. And so, you know, the colleagues that I interact with the most in psychology tend to be either the people that I work with at my institution or people in cardiology, and nobody else on the board is in cardiology. And I've gotten to know people across so many different areas of specialty. And I think there's a real benefit to that, to have the opportunity to connect with people from different institutions and people who have different viewpoints. And it's really great. And then I just want to agree with something that someone else said before, which is that I do think that it really gives you confidence to then go on to other positions. So I served on the steering committee for in a leadership role for a cardiology specific organization. And I don't know that I would have felt comfortable running for that had I not been in the roles that I was in SPP. And then I was able to bring things to that organization, which was a much newer organization that I learned from SPP. So now we have SIGs. And I you know, proposed that we develop SIGs for that organization because I had, you know, become familiar with that process at SPP. So I think there's just so many benefits that will just continue on, you know, as you go on with your career and move into other positions.
And Gail, I see you have a question about the process for selection and timeline. So for the voting, the positions that are voting, and this year there's president, there's treasurer, and there's a member at large for CE. You have to have the 10 nominations, and it's literally just somebody saying, I nominate Gail for treasurer, sent to Aaron Ross at Dagnon. So it's very, very easy. And if you don't have 10 people that you know in this organization, just email one of us. We know people. And that then gets submitted to APA, that slate of nominees, I think middle of February. I think the voting starts March or April. And regardless of whether you put your name in, vote. It's really, really an important way to be involved. And I'm pretty sure it doesn't take that long, like maybe May, June or something, that they call. And I remember Tim Wysocki called me and I thought it was a joke. It was actually really funny. Like I had a moment where I was like, I don't know, why am I getting this call? Because you've sort of forgotten about it at that point. And then you have like another 6 months where you can even like tag along to board meetings and start talking to the person in that role before you transition it in January. For the other committees, liaisons, other positions, it sort of depends on where they are in the process, but even filling out that form, and for the moment I can't find it, but I'll make sure that Erin posts it with this video, it's just sort of filling out what kinds of things you're interested in, because that's where we're going to reference when we're looking for committees or things like that. And just even like telling people I'm interested in serving in some capacity is a great way to sort of get in the door. Does anyone have any other thoughts about that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, oh, sorry, go ahead, Erica.
Oh, I was just going to say, if you don't get it the first time, run again. I would say most of us on the board have run for something that we did not get. And that's just fine. And it doesn't really say anything. It just means do it again. Try again.
It's grant writing, it's 1 out of 5 or something like that,
Yeah, I was going to say something along the lines of that, of what I think another thing that we talked about as a board is how for people who didn't win, other positions that might come up like task forces, so that there's still a benefit, because at some point you were willing to serve. So maybe there's another role you might be willing to serve. So even if you don't win, you might be tapped for some other role and invited to apply for another role. And then the other thing I was going to say that we haven't mentioned yet is the statements. So I feel like no one really told me about the statement. I felt like it was just something you threw together. I think it's a good idea to like think about what you want to say. And I was proud of my statement because I said what I wanted to do and who I was and put my identity in there and all of the things. And I don't know if that's why I won. I have no idea, but I know I was authentic to who I was in the statement, and that mattered to me. So I would say, like, if you have a vision or something, I think there can be this is what people usually submit. So I will just submit what other people have done. And I would encourage folks to write what you really want to bring. If it's something different and you have a voice, like that's really, I think, what appeals. And that's, we're looking for diversity to the board in all things. So your perspective and the vision you're bringing, maybe you're a first gen student and you're thinking, or, first gen faculty, and you have a voice or an idea about how that could help, how we can make that presence more on the board, or think about that in our meetings or whatever. I think sharing that in your statement and not just doing the same, not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying, make your voice heard, because I think you'll be amazed that many people have that voice and don't hear it or see it on the board, and that appeals to people. So that's one thing I would say about the statement, because I feel like people don't often talk about that. And, when there are 3 or 4 people going, people probably look at the statements to decide who to vote for.
A nice self-reflection point, at least for me, when I had to write my statement, it was really sitting down and thinking about what was important to me and what I thought was a priority for me, for SPP, for the role moving forward, and then putting it down and seeing if other people felt the same way. And kind of using that as an opportunity, and then people vote, at least for the elected board member position.
And I think it's very likely that if you do run for an elected position, like Adia said, you likely will be tapped for something in the future. And I think that in a way, just running is sort of putting yourself into a position where you're going to get involved on the board. That was what happened for me. I ran for something, I didn't get it, but then I got asked to do something else, and then it kind of went on from there.
Any other questions before we wrap up? You guys have stuck with us. We intended for this to be short, but we all get excited, and I think really enjoy talking about this because it's something we are passionate about, and we really hope to bring in other passionate people with unique and interesting perspectives. So really hoping that anyone here watching this, takes a moment to really think about whether this is something they could think about doing.
And I think just to acknowledge, though, Eleanor, with just being a former SPAC chair, what year were you? Was it 2 years ago that you were SPAC chair? 3 years ago? Oh, time flies.
Yeah, during the nightmare of the first virtual conference that we had, that was the year that I chaired. And yes.
Sorry, didn't mean to bring that up, but you did great. And
amazing.
It was wonderful.
It was so smooth, smooth.
Oh, good.
And I think Jason, as former APA program chair too, I think sometimes, those positions don't get acknowledged so much, and they do so much work to make our conferences and the programming that we have at our conferences so worthwhile. So because I just noticed the 2 of them were here, I was like, wait a minute, they never get acknowledged. So I just wanted to give a shout out.
That is hard work.
That's really sweet. Thank you. Well, actually, I just wanted to say, not really a question, I guess, but just thank you all for your work on the board and for having this meeting. I was program chair, and I do want, SPP is my home, and I want to serve, and I'm just trying to figure out in what what's the best capacity for me to do that? I know I'm not qualified to be treasurer, and I'm not a clinical person, so I'm not going to be for MAL CEs either, but I'm just trying to think about where could my, I do have time, I want to help, and what is the best way for me to do that. And just hearing you all talk today just made me think about some different positions that I might be interested in, but also I think it'd probably be a good idea for me to get more involved in my SIGs and have some leadership experience there too before trying to get an appointed position, or not an appointed, an elected position on the board. So, but thank you. This is really informative today.
Sure.
And just, I would say, fill out that form when it's posted with the thing, because again, that is a great way, because there might be new things you're not even thinking about that pop up that, that you could then be linked to. So that's another great way.
And I do think that's a really great point. There is no perfect time to join the board. You don't have to have some certain credential or some certain background to join the board. You really don't. And I think a lot of people hesitate because they think, oh my gosh, I'm not senior enough, or I haven't had enough experience, or I'm not academic, or I'm not clinical, or I'm not whatever. None of those things are really relevant. If you think you have something to say and something to do, then you are absolutely totally qualified to run.
Or if someone squeezes your hand and tells you you should do it, also do it, because maybe they see something in you that you don't see in yourself yet, right? And so I think that's part of it. If someone says, oh, I think you'd be great for this, like, just take a leap, and you never know.
Thanks, guys. Please, everyone, stay very safe and take care of yourselves. And we really appreciate you being there. This will be online on pedpsych.org. So let people know, colleagues know, if they missed it and want to check it out. We're here. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for the time.
Bye.